Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me okay in the back? Cool. I have lost my voice, so if I cough during the talk, please excuse me. I'm going to talk about React 19. And in case you didn't know, React 19 is in RC stage, which basically means it is a release candidate, ready for release, not ready for use, but ready for library developers. So, in the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about why the hell do we need React 19? And if you're somebody like me who looks at React 19 and is like, all right, new shiny thing, time to upgrade, I'm going to show you why you need to wait a little bit and what are the things you need to know about React 19. Also, I don't have my notes, so if I forget, I'm going to just wing it. I feel like every time a new version of React 19 or like React comes out, I'm like, okay, I just upgraded my React 16 app to React 18, and it took me so long to convince my boss that I need some time to upgrade it. Now, do I have to upgrade to the new version? And what is that going to take? But in this talk, I will show you what are the features of React 19 that are going to be helpful for you as an app developer. So we'll talk about everything you need to know about React 19, how to upgrade, some new features, what's changing, and then we'll do a quick demo of how to convert React 18 to React 19 with a form that is currently in React 18, and we'll take it to React 19. We'll learn about React actions through this form and also learn about the two new hooks, use action state and use form status. Before I start talking about React, I'm going to quickly introduce myself. My name is Shruti Kapoor. I'm a front-end engineer at Slack. I was at React India 5 years ago, I believe the first one. I was born in Chandigarh, so I'm a proud Indian. Anybody from Chandigarh here? Yeah, look at my Punjabis. Yeah, hey. Nice to see you here. You can all find me on Twitter. Is there a helicopter? You can all find me on Twitter or YouTube or stuff like that with Shruti Kapoor 08. If I can go back, never mind. But if you've attended any of my talks, you know what's coming. Dev jokes! Yes. So, the way this works is I'll ask you a question, just like they just did, and you just yell the answer out. If you don't know, you can make shit up. If it's nerdy, it's even better. If it's a bad joke, it's even better. So, the first question. What is a React developer's favorite workout? What is a React developer's favorite workout? Lifting state. How did HTML get drunk? Too many beers. Okay, if you know a dev joke or have asked ChatGPT 1, there is actually a repo to add your dev jokes to. And you can find it here on GitHub. So, I know some of you are thinking, okay, enough with the dev jokes. I came here for React 19. Give me the good shit. Here it comes. So, we'll talk about what's new in React 19. Broadly speaking, the new things in React 19 can be divided into the new features of React 19, the hooks, and API. First, let's talk about new features. One of the most popular features of React 19 has been React Actions, which has been broadly talked about. So we're going to spend a few minutes talking about React Actions. To understand React Actions, I think it's helpful to understand why they were introduced in the first place. So here we have a div element, which is something similar to, you can think of like a form. So this is something that similar to how you would do a form as well. We have a simple input field that has an onChange. You set the name using onChange, and then you have a button. So anytime input fields updates, you want to submit that form or that container or whatever using the onClick handler. So we'll have handle submit here. Typically, before actions or in React 18 currently, the way we do this is we'll have a handle submit function. And then if you want to call the API, we usually do that here. If you want to redirect, we'll do that here. If you ever want to show like a loading state, this is also the place we do that. So we'll have like an set is pending, which is just a use state. And then we'll have like an error. And then we'll set the is pending to false if we're starting the transaction. Once you've done the transaction, we'll set it back to true. Once everything is done, if there's any error, we'll show set error. So basically, the way we are doing is using manual state updates with set states. In React 18, start transition was introduced. Does anybody know what start transition is with a show of hands? Okay, so a few. So quickly, I'll talk about this. Start transition or use transition hook, which it comes from, is the way we tell React to mark certain updates as urgent. And an example of this is when you have a Google search field, you type something. Imagine that you're on a slow computer or a slow network. You want to show the user that they have typed something, and once they type something like React, you want to show some search results. Now, in this case, there's two feedback happening. One is the user typing something in the field, which is something that the user needs to see immediately to know that the input is working or that the app is working. So that's called immediate feedback or urgent feedback. Then the next bit is actually looking up that keyword. So if you have search, or like if you have React, you want to call your API and look for anything that has React. And that can wait a little bit because you're actually calling an API and the user does not actually expect you to show the results right away. So it's called a non-urgent update. In React 18, the way we can improve performance is by marking certain updates as non-urgent. In this case, searching for that React term. So in React 18, you would actually wrap that block up in a start transition or a use transition hook. So that's where start transition comes from. The delta between React 18 and React 19 is that in React 19, you can actually now pass an async functions, which is something that we're doing here. So you'll see that we have an async function, and we've just moved our API call or a setting error inside the API function. Now this is an action. So simply speaking, actions are just functions that use async transitions. They're also supported on the server, so it's really helpful when you're creating a React Server components as well, because you can add actions in React Server components as well. Well, we talked about what actions are, but how does it help and what does it change and how is that going to affect us? So why it's helpful is because you can plug an action inside a form. So if you remember, like the way we previously did actions or forms was we'll have an handle submit, or we'll have like an on-click handler. With React 19, we don't need to have an on-click handler anymore. We can just add an action to a form, wire it up like we used to do back in the PHP days, and your form is good to go. This action is actually inspired from frameworks like Remix, and if you're familiar with PHP, action might feel very familiar. Anybody ever use PHP? A few of you. That's really encouraging to see. At least it's not zero. So you might find this familiar. A cool thing about this use form status is that it gives this data back, which is the pending variable. And this is helpful because remember initially we were setting is pending manually using set states. We don't have to do that anymore in React 19. So that makes it really helpful. So with the help of React Actions, we don't have to manually track loading states anymore, and we don't have to use set states to get the data back from our input fields because we can use the new hooks that have been introduced, such as use form status. I'll show this to you in code so it makes a lot more sense at the end of this presentation, but just understand that React Actions simplify how we use forms. Okay, we'll talk about React Compiler. If you've been a big hater of use memo and use callback, there is some relief for you. You don't have to do that anymore because React Compiler can take care of it for you. Because with React Compiler, you get auto memorization. I'll explain this a little bit. So has anybody here used use callback? Oh my God, that's like all of you. Damn. I'm so happy that so many of you are using use callback because the thing that we do with use callback, if you're not aware, is we use it so that we can cache some of the functions that we've been using so we don't have to create it on every render. Same with use memo. We use that for values. So if you're not familiar how use callback is used, we'll put a function, wrap it around use callback. With React 19, it introduces a new plugin called React Compiler. It's not part of the React 19 package, it's just available as a plugin. So it introduces auto-memoization, which means that you don't have to do use memo or use callback manually anymore. So if you do have use memo or use callback in your code, you don't have to worry about moving it over to React 19. React 19 will take care of it for you. So it optimizes re-renders on the app for you. And the way it does that is specifically by two things. The first is by skipping re-rendering of children when parent updates. What does that mean? Is this legible for everybody in the back? Cool, awesome. So here you'll see that we have a component called friends list. And we check if friends is 0. But basically what we're doing is we have a map function, friends.map, which calls a friend and renders another component, friends list card. Now you can imagine that every time friends updates, this component re-renders. And so in this case, React understands that it doesn't need to re-render the children when parent updates. So if friends updates, it doesn't need to re-render every single friend list card. The next bit that it helps with is skipping expensive calculations. And I'll talk about that how. So in React 19, React only memoizes components and hooks, not every function. Just a big caveat for you to know. What does that mean? That let's say we have a really expensive process in the top of our function, at the top of our app, which is not a React hook, not a React component, just a function. React will not touch this. It will not optimize this. However, at the bottom of this, if we are calling that somewhere and we have this expensive process, that data would be memoized. So it won't touch the original function, which you can imagine could be like a library function or a utility function, but it's going to memoize the reference of it. So anything that's not a React component or a hook will not be touched because it's outside of React's boundary. Now, there's a plugin that comes with React Compiler, which is the React Compiler Playground, which helps you kind of understand what code has been memoized and not. And this is really helpful for understanding which code is optimized, because React only memoizes or auto-optimizes the code that follows the rules of React. In this example, you can see on the right that there is a $sign and an _C. So anytime you see that _C, it basically means that React is using the React compiler, and it's an auto-optimized code. So basically, now you don't need to use memo and use callback anymore. What if you're like, but I love my use memo and use callbacks. I'm going to keep using it. That's fine. You can do what you want. I'm not your mom. So the way to install this is by doing npm install ESLint plugin React compiler. It's like I said, it's a separate plugin. Doesn't come as part of the React 19 package, so it's available as a plugin. And you can put it in your Webpack exports like this. There's also a working group, which is really helpful if you're looking to upgrade to React compiler and you're running into some issues. I think why this group is really helpful is because if you already have code that is using use memo and use callback, that optimization is done a little bit different than how React compiler optimizes it. So if you move to React 19 and you tend to see that there are some issues with your use memo code, this is a pretty good place to kind of raise that question up if there ever comes an issue. Okay, so those are the two new features of React, the actions and compiler. Now we're going to talk about some new hooks. The first hook that I think is really helpful is the use form status hook. Use form status hook is really helpful for getting the information of the last form submission, which basically means that if you have a form that was submitted, this hook will give you information on whether or not the form is still in pending status, so you can show a loader if you want to, or disable some of the submit buttons if you have. It will also give you back data of the fields that were in the form, so you can understand what the data was sent, or if you want to ever clean up your data, this hook can be really helpful. It also has a method if you need that in action, which is something that we're going to look at right now. One caveat of use form status is that it can only be used inside a form's child component. What does that mean? So let's say we have a form here and we are adding the use form status within the form component. This won't work. The way to make this work is you have to create a child component called submit and use form status within that child component. So that was use form status. We talked about an action. There's also a helpful hook for that, which is use action state. which, according to what the name suggests, it updates the state based on the action itself. And it's helpful because it'll give you the state back that was returned from the action by however the action modified it, and it'll give you the form action. Now, this form action is really helpful because this is the one that you're going to wire up your form with. So you'll say form action and this form action. So if you have a form, you'll use the action form action that comes back from this hook. And so this is how your form kind of changes, and this hook can be really helpful. Now, the final hook that I'll talk about is use optimistic hook, and this hook is really helpful if you want to show some data which is kind of like optimistically rendered. Anybody here who knows what optimistic rendering is? Cool. I'm glad I'm asking this question because I thought I would just assume everybody knows. Okay. Optimistic rendering is when you want to show kind of like an optimistic or like best case scenario of result. Let's just say that a user is submitting a form, and let's say that they are trying to submit their form, Shruti, or like hello Shruti. And we want to do some validation on the server, and you want to say that if the text that they entered was valid strings, which means just alphabets, you want to show hello and their name. And if it's not valid strings, you want to show error field or whatever. And you're doing this validation on the server. Let's just imagine. Now, when a user writes hello and their name, they submit it. There'll be a little bit of waiting time before you get the response back from the server. During that time, you can actually optimistically show hello, their name. So they don't have to wait for that data to come back. And let's just say that the data comes back negative from the server. You can say error occurred. So you'll change what you were showing. Or you can say just waiting for your name to be submitted or something like that. So you're optimistically showing a best case scenario. That's what optimistic rendering is. So use optimistic hook can be really helpful for optimistically updating the UI. And also really helpful in forms as well because you're waiting for the user to submit the form, waiting for the server to perform an action. And this hook can be helpful in showing some sort of positive reinforcement. Now, finally, we'll talk about a new API that React introduces, which is the use API. Sounds like a hook, but not a hook. It is actually an API. And the way to use this API is to actually read resources with this. I think a specific resource that I love using with this is actually context. And you might have seen contexts in React apps. So theme context is an example here. Let's say you want to read something from the context. Instead of calling a context provider and then reading from it, you can just call the use API and then you get data back from it. Super easy to use. Again, also you can use it for promises as well. Just call use comment promise and you get it back from use. However, the problem with this is that it can only be called within the render method of React app components. So, what's new in short? 2 new features, React Compiler, available as a plugin, and React State, and React Actions. 3 new hooks, use action state, use form status, use optimistic, which can be useful for managing form status, getting data out of an action, getting data out of a form, and optimistically render data in the UI. And then we have a new API called use, which can be really helpful for reading context or reading data out of a promise. So, what's changed? Ref is a prop now. Anybody here uses refs? Oh my God, that's a lot of you. I did not expect this. Good news for all of you. Ref is no longer a forward ref anymore. You can just call ref and use it. No longer do you have to worry about why the heck is my ref not updating and did I even forward ref anymore? Ref is now a prop. You pass it, you use it, all simple. I think some of you who may not be using refs may not appreciate how good this is, but honestly for me, I have seen so many bugs because ref was undefined and I was like, I see a component here. Why is there no ref, right? I see somebody nodding. And now you won't have that bug anymore. Such a big relief. Then you don't have any more use memo and use callbacks. You don't have to use them anymore. They're still around, but React Compiler will do the magic of auto-optimization for you. There are some other errors, some other updates. Errors are now better polished. You can use context instead of context provider. One specific one that I'm really excited about is the metadata. And specifically, it looks like this. You can pass meta tag into any React component. And I think this is really helpful, especially if you have like a blog site or your own personal site, because now you can add meta tags for that blog post. Better for SEO, better for your business. Another really cool thing about React 19 updates is the addition of preferences of style sheets. which basically means that you can give something like precedence equals default, which just loads it in the default form, default order. Or you can give a precedence of high, which means that even if the link of that style sheet is low in the document, it will still be treated as a high priority. So if there are some styles you want to load first, you can give it a precedence of high, which is really cool. So how to upgrade, npm install, super easy, dependencies get added. Now let's do the cool part, demo. I have 9 minutes, so I'm gonna try to rush through this so you don't have to rush me out. Let's see, can you see this? Is it legible in the back? Cool, awesome. So I upgraded my app to Node 20 and hence broke the demo, so I'm not gonna bother running it. So I'll just show you the code. Okay, so in this part of the demo, we're gonna actually look at a React 18 form and see how to upgrade it to React 19. I'm gonna zoom it in a little bit. Anybody here uses React forms? Or like forms in general? Cool, okay, so you can understand my pain. So in React 18 right now, the way we do forms is we'll have a form component, we'll have like input fields, and then we'll have like a loader state if you have any. We'll add the name by using like a set state, using an onChange handler. In the onChange handler, all we're doing is using like a use state. And then we'll have like set name or set whatever, and we'll update based on whatever the value was coming back. And then in order to submit the form, we'll have like a button on click. We'll have a button such as on click, which will handle submit. And the thing it'll do is it'll have like is pending, which is where we're doing like loader states. It'll call an API and then set the pending state to false. So this is how we were doing loading states. This is React 18. Now, to upgrade this to React 19, there are a few things we need to change. So I'm going to comment this out, and I'll show you what React 19 form looks like. Okay. Doesn't go here. It goes here. Okay, so in React 19, we talked about that we need to use form action. Now we have a new action thing that we need to use, and this action or form action actually comes from the new hook that we talked about, which is the use action state hook. This use action state gives us back two things, the state and the form action. We use the form action here, and the state, we're going to pass it down to any of our components that needs to know the data that was submitted to the form or the data that was coming back from the form. Let's quickly also look at what's in the submit form action. It's actually really simple, but all this is doing is getting the data from the field, which was input name in our case. We only have one field. Calling an API and just modifying the state and returning the name back. Very simple form, doesn't do anything really. But this submit form action is a valid action. So all it's doing is it's an async function that modifies the state. That's an action. Now we've got this form action back here, we've hooked it up here. Now in order to use the data that came back from this form after submitted, all this form is doing is it's got like an input field. The user is going to enter their name, and then we want to just show hello or something. So in order to do that, we have this render name component, which says hello in React 19, and then the name of the person. Now, I talked about use form status, which is really helpful in getting the pending state out so you don't have to have manual loaders. This is how we can use it. So we call the use form status. This is a child of the form, so it's a valid syntax here. We can use form status here. So we'll have the pending state, and then we say if it's not pending, show the data. Now let's say that we have a component that needs to know what name was submitted. We have that through the state. So again, in my render name component, I'm just using the state, and that gets passed back into the component. And that comes back from the form action as well. Then we want to talk about the loader as well. Initially, we were doing set is pending in React 18, and we'll set the is pending to false. But in React 19, you just call the hook, which is use form status. You get pending from it. You don't need to set it. You can just use it and be good to go. So that's all that changes in React 19. To recap, I'll show you what React 18 looks like and what React 19 looks like. This is a React 19 form. I'll make it small a bit. Is it still legible in the back? Cool. Okay. This is a React 19 form, and on the left, I have a React 18 form. And so the difference here is, first of all, form action is now a new thing. You can use a form action instead of having to manually submit. We don't need an on-click handle submit anymore because that is being taken care of automatically. Then we actually have this submit button. In this, literally all we're doing is disabling the button if the form is still being submitted, so we're not resubmitting the form again and again. Initially, in order to change or in order to capture the value from an input field, we would use set states. But in React 19, we can actually get it back from the use action state and use form status. And we'll have all the state that we need. So that's the difference between React 18 and React 19 talk. And React 19. All right, quick recap of everything we talked about today. So, with React 19, forms are getting a much better support in becoming first-class citizens. Finally, it's now becoming a lot easier to manage pending states and get data back from the form based on what was submitted and if the form was successfully sent. You don't have to use memos and use callbacks anymore. React will take care of that for you using the React compiler plugin. No more forward refs, no more stupid bugs. So here's a snapshot of everything that has changed in React 19. I didn't get time to talk a lot about React Server components, so I'll leave this here if you want to take a screenshot. Cool. One last thing. I feel like a lot of you sitting here may be wanting to get up on the stage one day or may have this dream of becoming a conference speaker. I want to tell you, it's a lot easier than you think. I was speaking at my first conference event almost 7 years ago, and I remember my legs were shaking, and I was like, why am I doing this to myself? But then when I got off the stage, I was like, heck yeah, I want to do this again. So if you're in the audience thinking, I want to be up on the stage as well one day, I'm telling you, you can do this. I have a video that has helpful tips on what topics you want to submit or what conferences and where to apply. Here's the link to that. It's a QR code. You can scan if you want to. Don't have to, not mandatory. And if you're ever looking for topics you want to do or want to do a brainstorm, hit me up on Twitter. I'll help you out. Please come up and talk up on the stage. Finally, thank you so much for being such an amazing audience. But I cannot leave without one final dev joke. So how does a developer cheer? Hip hip hooray! Hip hip hooray. Thank you so much, everyone.